Let's start off by doing a deep dive comparison between the Acura Type S, the BMW M240i, the Audi S3, and the BMW 330i xDrive. While the 330i is not typically compared to the Integra, I believe it is the most similar car due to the fact that the dimensions are almost identical, whereas the BMW 2 Series and S3 are smaller cars and are a little bit less comparable directly when you consider more than just the price and the performance. Starting off with the MSRPs, both the Type S and the 240i are $52,600. The S3 is $51,100 and the 330i xDrive $47,950. These are the US MSRPs and do not take into consideration the added options needed to spec these cars to be equal. One of the troubles that I often see online with comparisons is that they take these for the value of the car and they do not consider any kind of optioning that needs to take place in order to make these cars equal with the value to that price, nor do they consider any kind of cost that comes after the fact in terms of maintenance, depreciation, and operating costs. So with that, Edmunds has a great tool which at the bottom of the comparison page, they call it the true cost to own. So where the Type S and the M240i were both starting at the same price, you could expect that after 5 years of ownership, you would pay an eye-watering $14,000 more to own the M240i. Both the Audi S3 and the BMW 330i still come in at $7,000 and $6,000 more expensive to own, even though they started with an MSRP lower than that of the Integra. And this is some combination of the depreciation factor, which all three German cars here depreciate significantly more than the Integra. The maintenance costs are significantly more than the Integra, and the repair costs as well. So these are factors that when you price or base yourself on comparison on only the MSRP, you are robbing yourself of a true comparison and the total costs that are associated with it. So I highly suggest if you really want to compare, I would come here and have an equal platform to do the true costs to own. While these numbers might not be the actual numbers experienced at the end, you might have a mechanic friend who could do some maintenance or do some stuff. I would expect that your scenario or your situation should be equally applicable to all, so they should proportionally move up or down depending on the realities of your specific experience. I just want to get back to a point I made earlier about the starting MSRPs not being reflective of the realities, and this is due to the fact that the Integra Type S has many features that are included standard in this starting price, whereas the German options or competitors do not. They have them as separate options, paid options, which quickly increase the price. So we'll go through the configurator to point out some of these increases so we could get a true apples to apples comparison. But before we do, I just want to hop over to the Canadian side to show how the ITS in Canada is an even better value. Here in Canada, the Integra Type S is 57,100 Canadian dollars. This is less expensive than the M240i, where it was equal in the United States. Here it is $3,800 more expensive. Even the less pricey 330i xDrive in the United States is more expensive here in Canada at $1,300 more than the ITS. Now, if you wanted the engine or the drivetrain of the 240i combined with the space of the 330i and you wanted to try to look at the M340i, here in Canada it's in a completely different price bracket. At $71,400, it is $14,300 more expensive than the Integra, and basically I do not see any kind of comparison being able to be made considering how big of a gap the price is. Last but not least, the Audi S3 sedan. It's 57,800, and this is probably the most similar in price. However, once again, let's continue on to the configurator to show how the Germans tend to nickel and dime the customers. They show a low MSRP, but when it comes time to get the options that are included in the Type S, they do not include it as standard. You have to price it out, and usually it's part of a package. So let's go there. For the configurator, I've selected the BMW 330i xDrive sedan. However, you could really take any BMW or even the Audi for that matter for what we're trying to achieve to demonstrate that to add the features that are included standard on the Integra Type S, you're going to need to go above and beyond the starting MSRP that BMW and Audi offers. So in this case, we're starting off with 61,633 Canadian. So this is the Canadian configurator. And what we'll do is this is including the PDI and a couple of other features, but just keep the $61,000 in mind because that's what we're starting off with, and we want to see how much we have to add to get to the level of the Integra Type S features. So we're going to skip all the aesthetics for now because this is for you to choose. I mean that this is on a very highly opinionated matter, but we can do options that are more absolute for an apples to apples comparison. So I'm going to skip the packages for now, we'll come back to them, but essentially we want to get the adaptive suspension. So this is the M Sport, but I think the adaptive suspension is here, and of course it's part of a package. So if we select this package, we get a bunch of things that are included in the ITS. So the 19-inch rims, the variable sports steering, and the leather steering wheel. So these options come under a $3,000 option here, but for whatever reason we're adding only $2,750 to the total price. That's still an extra $2,750 above just to start to get in line with what the Integra offers. Another thing, if we wanted to be picky, I see here the red brakes. That would be an extra $500, and let's just see. Well, if you want them, you have to add a package. You can't offer them separately, so I'm not going to include them, but just goes to show you aesthetic wise, the Integra does have things that BMW is charging you extra, and I do think we need to look at the premium package. So for the premium package, yeah, the premium audio system, Harman Kardon versus ELS. We'll let the audiophiles argue over which one's better, but you still have to pay extra for the premium audio that is included standard in the Integra. Lumbar support, the Integra has it, this does not. Comfort access, Integra has it, this does not. It does not have a drive recorder, so this is basically a glorified dash cam, and it does not have the surround view for parking. So that is something that might be a little bit more. So maybe instead of 4,000 extra dollars, it's 3,000 extra dollars. But a lot of these features, including the HUD too that I forgot, are included in the Integra that you would have to select this option to kind of get those features here in the BMW. So I think with that, we could kind of look at the price, and where we started at 61,000, we're already at 68,000. So we've added an extra $7,000 and basically priced it out from the Integra Type S just to get the features and the options that are included standard. So I could already hear the furious keystrokes of all those online saying, "Yeah, but you're doing the 330i. It's the M240i that's the better value. That's the car to compare." And to that I say, I think a lot of the comparisons are mismatched because what you're talking about is you're talking about a two-door car which has next to no room compared to a four-door hatch, which is basically the same as the 330i. And I think that's one thing we need to compare. So if we go back to the comparison charts, if we talk about length of the car, so how long is the car? 186 inches, 179.4, let's call it 180, so half a foot shorter. The S3 is absolutely small at 177, and then you got 185.9. Let's call it 186. It's basically zero point 0.1 of an inch in length shorter than the ITS, and this was the 330i. In terms of cargo space, 24 cubic feet of space. You got 13.8 here, 8.3 here. So you basically got almost 3 times the cargo space in the Integra as you do the S3. And then even if we go to the 330i, it's 16.9 cubic feet versus 24.3. Now, in terms of legroom, which is often very important to people, and I think even more so for the ITS because people are buying it for the fact that it's a four-door, you got legroom of 42.3, 41.8, 41, and 42. So once again, the biggest one, the most room is the Integra, and it's most comparable to the 330i, not the 240i. Moving on to the rear, this is where the Integra really shines. So rear headroom and legroom. The headroom is still more. It's people complain. You'll see reviews that there's not much headroom in the back, but to compare to the 240i, you got a full 1.5 inches, even more, that you have in the Integra versus this. And yes, it is maybe an inch smaller than the BMW 330i, but it's comparable to it in some degree. But it's the legroom. If you look at the legroom part, 37.4, 32.2, so 5 inches of difference in the back. The S3 is actually impressive, and I think at 35.2, what they're doing here is they're maximizing interior leg room over cargo space. This is why there's such a difference between these two. I think they've put rear leg room as more important. And then even in the BMW 330i, you're talking about the same room as the S3, which is impressive in itself for the S3, but you're always going to lose out somewhere, and the Integra is where it's at in terms of interior space and storage volume. So that is where I think a lot of the online comparisons miss, is that while they compare the ITS performance wise to the M240i or the S3, in terms of practicality, it's punching above that category and it's going into the 3 series in terms of spacing. So that's why I really think the true comparison is the 330i when it comes down to pricing, because when you go to the 340i, as we saw, I don't have space for it here, but in the Canadian spec here, once you get to the 340i, you're in a different category. You might as well start to consider some other stuff. So this brings me to my final point, and that is I do not understand the obsession with trying to make the Integra Type S something that it is not. And if they want an Acura and they want an all-wheel drive and they want an automatic, what I don't understand is, again, it's a free market. Nobody's forcing you to buy the Integra or consider the Integra. Go to the Acura TLX Type S. It has all those things. It has the super handling all-wheel drive. It has the sunroof. It has the ventilated seats. It has the rear vents, which that's one thing that really boggles the mind, why people are so concerned about rear facing vents when, while yes it is spacious, it's not an amphitheater that needs 100 different vents in order to cool down. In summertime, in the dead of summer, the front AC still cools down the whole car relatively quickly, but some people seem to be so upset that it doesn't have rear vents. If that's important to you, get a TLX. If it's really important to you, you could even consider another car brand. But why are you trying to add cost, complexity, and stupidity to the Integra Type S when it frankly does not need it? It is a driver's car that should be kept the way it is because they have achieved a certain perfection that is few and far between these days. But overall, this is a car worth considering, and I do not think, if it's on your radar, I do not think you should dismiss it until you actually get behind the wheel of it.